So the first thing I wanted to say was that one of the reasons I started this channel was because I was inspired by a bunch of YouTubers, and I was watching the Accent Shitlords for about long time ago, and it was basically you and Goodfella that got me interested and got me motivated, and I thought, yeah, I can do that shit. Yeah, so I've listened to you guys for I don't know how long, a couple of years or whatever, as long as you've been doing streams. You remember the old, remember the postmodernist guy? Remember that episode where he just kept saying postmodernist all the time?
Yeah.
It was
Ed, I think.
yeah.
Yeah,
So first I want to get that out of the
with
way.
the weird accent.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing, I thought it'd be interesting to have you on because I just want to get somebody's view as an Israeli because I don't really get the anti-Israeli sentiment, the anti-Semitism. I know the history, obviously, but I don't get why, for example, most of Europe sort of seems to tacitly back Palestine. Israel is the only secular democracy in the entire region. You think it would be a no-brainer, but it seems to be something on the left, a very sort of anti-Semitic strain. And I know a lot of people blame George Soros for the problems of the world, and they see the rest of Judaism as some kind of extension of George Soros. But to me, it still baffles me. And so I want to talk to you about what do Jewish people in Israel think about Trump? Or just Israelis in general, what do they think about Trump? Do they think it's better to have him there than Obama, or is he just an unknown loose cannon? What's your feel on it?
So of course, it divides naturally. People from the left in Israel, they are afraid from Trump. They have this relatively the same fears like people in other countries, I guess.
Mm.
They see him as like a bigoted man, a stupid, person,
Mm-hmm.
dumb person, and they're afraid he's going to uh, make a lot of bad decisions that will harm the economy, harm, a lot of people in rights and stuff.
Yeah.
These are people from the left, and of course, people from the center right. People from the center, they might see him as not the most intelligent person, but they are not afraid. They're not concerned about if he's going to have more, extreme vetting in the United States or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And people from the right are actually, they have been listening to what he has been saying, and they see kind of a hope because after Obama, people from the center and from the right, they really didn't like Obama and his
Mm-hmm.
actions.
Mm-hmm. Well,
They
look,
saw him as pandering for the Palestinians
yeah.
on the expense of the Israelis, and now that Trump is in and he's coming with a completely different voice, they see a glimpse of hope that things will change.
Yeah. So put into perspective that move that Obama pulled just on his way out, where he basically they refrained from voting on settlements,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
How was that seen?
So, well, that was seen like a sort of a betrayal because usually, and I think almost all of the time, there is like an unofficial balance of power between, or kind of an agreement that the Europeans are all of them going to vote against Israel,
Mm.
or most of them, and then they're going to make a resolution, pass it to the Security Council, and in the Security Council, the United States will veto it,
Hmm.
right? Not to take forcible actions against Israel.
Yeah.
So I don't recall a single time where the United States did not veto such decisions, unilateral decisions,
Yeah.
to force some kind of law or rules on Israel.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this he has done. He vetoed every resolution
Mm.
up until that moment where he just left the White House.
Right.
So it's like poke you in the eye and run out the door,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I don't know if he did a couple of those things. I don't know if you saw in the last couple of
Yeah,
days. Of course, it's got huge play here in Australia because it directly affects Australia. As soon as Trump was elected, Our prime minister came out literally 5 days after Trump's election and announced a deal with Obama that America was going to take something like between 1,200 and possibly 2,000 refugees off our hands. That they were illegal refugees. They'd come on boats and things. And of course, Australia has, well, we're lucky enough to be an island, so we have offshore processing. So we won't receive refugees onshore. We put them in detention in some of these Pacific islands. One of them's called Nauru. And so we've done a deal with the United States that they're going to take those refugees off our hands. Now, I don't have a problem with the offshore processing thing, but we've had these people for too long. We've had them for years in these detention centers. So America was going to take them off our hands. Good deal. And we were going to get in return some Central American refugees, some Latin American refugees in return. And so this was a completely, it was a ridiculous move that our prime minister, in retrospect, thought he could get away with it. But it was another Obama just fuck you on the way out, because now Trump has actually stumbled across this thing. And yesterday there was a huge blow up because Trump basically got on a phone call with the Australian Prime Minister and said that this deal sucks, hung up the phone. There's all this hullabaloo whether it's even going to happen anymore, but it sounds like it is, because Trump's sort of, he can't really go back on it at this point. But Obama's done a couple of those things on his way out, and it seems, and unlike George Bush, he's firing from the fucking sidelines, and he hasn't even been out of office a week. It seems petty, and it seems like
cowardly.
And cowardly, exactly. Yeah.
Like the 57 Russian ambassadors or whatever that he deported on almost the very last day, and he wanted to. What do you gain from doing that? I mean, you're leaving the office. Yeah. You know that Trump is going to allow them to come back in, right?
Yeah. It really is.
It doesn't have any effect. It just makes you an asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
And an idiot.
And what are you trying to look like? Are you trying to look like a tough man now? The tough man who drew a red line in the fucking Middle East. And, like every single time he drew a line in the Middle East, wherever it was, he completely capitulated every time. And now he's going to walk away like a tough man? It's,
well, his foreign policies in the Middle East since day one sucked completely. I mean,
Remember the Arab Spring? Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It started when he went to Cairo and made that Cairo speech.
Yeah.
Going against the local regime by Mubarak, and afterwards it escalated to people, the in Facebook people started to talk about a revolution, and that came down to the streets, and then it happened in Algeria, I think, in Tunisia, the same thing, and it just swept across the entire Middle East. And Obama didn't do well. His policies were let's allow this to happen, and let's back the Muslim Brothers.
Yeah,
the Muslim Brothers, which was insane if you think about it, because the Muslim Brotherhood is not like a legitimate, party. It's like the Baath party.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think the guy from day one has just been a utopian idealist. He thinks we can all just join hands and sing Kumbaya and make the world a better place. I don't think he doesn't have the pragmatism to for international relations. I mean, this is a strange thing about him. Like, he's been lionized in the press, who he kind of made his own PR firm, but his record on foreign relations is just awful. I mean, it'll go down as pretty fucking awful. I don't see how you could write it any other way. Just terrible.
It is, and I think the end result of him being an ideologue like this, because I truly believe that he is ideologically motivated, and thinks that if we do everything, to be nice to each other and blah blah blah, things will work out. And I think that led him to some bad decisions, and I think that led him to getting upset and offended maybe by the actions of some leaders out there like Netanyahu and Putin and maybe others, and that drove him to spite.
Hmm.
And that's what we saw at the very last moments of him in the office.
Yeah, seems very
He
petty.
was spiteful
Yeah,
and spiteful.
yeah. The thing that that sort of bothered me from the very get go with him, if you remember, he came in during the you know, towards the end of the financial crisis in January 2009, and the stock market bottomed
Hmm.
out in March. The recession officially ended in June, but he came in sort of in the middle of that, and instead of a lot of the backlash today of some of these millennials, which is warranted in some cases, is that no one held the financial companies to account. And he came in and
That is true.
he said, look, we just want to wipe the slate clean. We don't want to play the blame game again. Just a silly utopian. I'm the grand master. I'm just going to wave my hand and
Well,
everything will be fine. And
well,
we'll hold. You know, we'll threaten the banks if you don't do what we say. We'll punish you. But you know, if you just contrast that with, say, a lot of people don't understand this historical context about financial disasters, but in the late 80s, early 90s, the savings and loan crisis, there was 1,000 executives put into orange jumpsuits by the FBI and went to jail. 1,000 executives. And that was minor in comparison to the financial crisis and the amount of fraud there.
I agree.
And he's
I
just
agree.
let...
Although,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead.
No,
Finish.
no,
Finish.
you go ahead.
So he did do two good things. I mean, the fact that he allowed AIG to continue and gave them, uh, how he bailed them, right?
Mm.
He bailed AIG,
Yeah, well, I
and
think...
then and then they took that money and gave bonuses to the executives.
Yeah.
But he allowed uh, Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers to collapse, which was a good thing on his part. I mean, he didn't bail them,
Well, that
and
was
that.
that predates Obama. That was Bush was still in control then. That's
Oh,
2008.
okay,
So yeah,
okay.
I,
So,
yeah,
so yeah, so even that he didn't do. Okay.
no. So and actually, I don't think he should have bailed AIG out, because what you ended up doing was bailing Goldman Sachs out. And actually, that wasn't his decision either. That was taken in 2008. He was part of the... Yes, we all came together and voted for the bailout package. But I mean, the Republicans also look stupid here, because a Republican president stood up and said we have to suspend capitalism in order to save it. I've never heard such fucking nonsense in my life. I mean, you don't have capitalism without failure. That's what
Well,
happens.
well, listen. Let me tell you a little story.
Mm.
In Israel, in the beginning of the 80s, we had raging inflation.
Mm.
In 1984, the inflation reached 400% each year. It means that you pick up your paycheck in the morning and you run to the grocery store because by afternoon you won't be able to buy as much food.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that as a kid.
Mm.
I was like 10 years old. And then in 1985, a new government came into power and they actually suspended capitalism to stop this raging inflation that ran for like 5 years in a row.
Mm.
And they managed to do that by freezing prices, freezing raises. They completely froze. They had like a 10-point plan for 1 year, and they froze the economy, and that actually dropped the inflation from 400% to 20% the next year, and then 10%, and then 5%,
Mm.
and it actually worked. And that was concocted by a brilliant economist who is a capitalist, and he was the secretary of the banks in Israel. How do you call it? Like the secretary of
Central banker?
finance?
Oh,
A
okay.
central banker, yeah.
Yeah.
His name is Stanley Fisher. He's an American, and Jewish and Israeli,
Yeah, I know who he
and
is.
he's
Yeah.
brilliant. Yeah, he was nominated to replace the
Bernanke.
the Bernanke, right?
Yeah.
and he was brilliant. And he managed to stop a 5-year inflation that nobody managed to stop, and it was raging. So sometimes you have to, it was like an emergency plan. You need to do that.
Oh, sure.
But then you,
The Fed, I mean, but, this financial crisis that we had 8-9 years ago was the complete opposite to that, which was, it was a deflationary crisis. It was an insolvency crisis and a liquidity crisis on top of it, because everyone was afraid to lend to one another. So there was no sort of inflation genie to get out of the bottle. It was about, they said that they were trying to stop the collapse of the entire system. I don't buy that. I've read plenty of books on it. I just don't buy it. AIG and Goldman Sachs could have went away. It wouldn't have mattered. And the United States has the best bankruptcy laws in the world. They have the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission. They go into banks on Fridays, close them down over the weekend, spin them out with new management on Monday. They do that all the time. Now, those organizations like Goldman Sachs, much bigger, would have taken longer, but you can do it. And I just think it's set an awful precedent, because now you have, if you read someone like the author of The Black Swan, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, you have a situation now where it's heads I win, tails you lose, because we know if we blow up the system, we'll get bailed out. You don't have skin in the game. You get to walk away because the government has your back. I think that's a terrible precedent to set. What you want is these guys, you're allowed to take risks, but if you blow up the system, you lose your job and you go to jail. That's what you need.
if you break the law, yeah.
Yeah.
Like when they did in the credit companies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you had Bernie Madoff. They made a big deal out of Bernie Madoff, and that was he was like a scapegoat for a lot. I mean, the head of Lehman Brothers, he should have went away. They committed fraud. Dick Fold, he should have went away. Dick Fold, the arrogant prick who had his own fucking escalator to get to the top floor for his own office because he didn't want to ride in an escalator with all the other plebs.
Well, did you watch the movie The Big Short?
I haven't watched that yet, but I've read the book, Lewis's
Okay,
book.
so it's probably the same thing. So you saw how corrupt and how criminal they acted. Everyone acted, especially the how do you call the companies that rate the banks?
Yeah, the ratings agencies. So they were awful.
Yeah.
Yep.
They knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that they are rating B minus bonds as A plus.
Yep.
They knew they are doing that.
Yep.
And they were afraid that if they would not do that, then the bank would go to a different company to get the ratings.
And that's why today they still exist in exactly the same format. They have the exact same corrupt way of doing business, which is, well, it's not corrupt, it's legal, but they get the issuers to pay them to get a rating. It's like you paying me to go out and tell everyone that you're wonderful. It's just bullshit. You have another company out there called Egan Ratings, and he was running around at the time saying this. He doesn't get paid by the people who issue the credit. He gets paid by the buyers. The buyers pay him to rate the credit, which is this is the way it should be done. But again, this is another one of those industries that was left hands off. Let's not fuck with it. And it's a disaster. We've still got all the wrong incentives in the system, all the wrong incentives. And the ratings agencies haven't learned anything. I mean, they're doing a better job this time around, no doubt about it, because there's eyes on them. But it's still a system with bad incentives.
Well, that's a capitalist system for you, but there are two different things here. One is incentivizing companies to act like that, but then what you need to do is uphold the law, which is a completely different thing. I mean, you can have a crooked capitalist system with no proper regulation or what have you, but as long as you have the law and people are breaking the law, then you should put them in jail. And this is the case for 2008.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's the problem. They just let too many people walk through. I mean, the robo signing scandal was just unbelievable. The robo signing where they were just getting completely unauthorized people to sign off on mortgage applications. They weren't reviewed. People were just basically in a room putting their signature on something, and these people were not trained loan officers, anything like that. This was fraud at a major level, and a lot of the big banks were doing it. A lot of the companies ended up going out of business, like Countrywide, all gone. They were doing it all, and they just walked away. They didn't get prosecuted for it. A couple of them made settlements out of court, paid some money. But that's what it's become. And it's the same way. Another related problem around the time was, remember, a lot of these big banks were doing money laundering. A lot of the big European banks were doing it, and they just get fined. It's just a cost of business. They pay a fine. Yeah, we launder people's money, and we get found out, and we get a $7 million fine. But fuck that. We make $7 million every hour. So who gives a shit?
Right. But laundering money is a criminal offense, right? A federal offense.
Yeah.
So people should go to jail.
They should, but they don't. They get fined. Banks get fined.
And that's the problem.
And another thing about the Obama administration is that they wouldn't even, like, the banks would pay fines for some of the things they did, but they wouldn't admit culpability. So they got out of it by not having to admit to committing a crime and just paying a fine, which is just, it's just, here's some money, fuck off and go away. That was all they did. And so it's...
And amazingly, Democrats are not pointing that out, and they are not admitting, or they are not conceding the fact that Hillary would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
And Trump, there is a chance that Trump will actually crack down on these people.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. I mean, I think you're exactly right.
If you look at this demeanor and his mannerism, his MO, it looks like he's going to actually fight this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it looks that way. It'll be interesting to see when he actually has a situation come up that maybe his own business interests are tied up in. See which way he swings. It depends, because every time something like that comes up, he's going to be scrutinized really closely to see if there's any connection there. I mean, look at this stupid claim that this list that he came up with of banning 7 majority Muslim countries was because he didn't have any business there. Well, 5 of those countries I think are failed fucking states for a start. So, why would he have business there? But it was a list, obviously, that Obama had come up with earlier. I think Trump's plan was not very well thought through, but look at the way the media's just all over him. He has to be squeaky clean. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting 4 years.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's definitely going to be more interesting than having Hillary, because he's going to put out executive orders out there that would really, stir shit up, and let's see what happens. I mean, I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing.
No, neither do I. He's definitely, I tell you what, in these first couple of weeks, what he's established, as far as I'm concerned, is that he's unpredictable. And I'm glad he's unpredictable, because like you just said, Hillary would have been entirely fucking predictable, right? But I think there's an element of unpredictability that's actually a good thing, and there's an element of unpredictability that's not a good thing. But I'm glad it's there. But what did you make of this fact, which I did not see reported in the media at all, except on the fringes, was that this horrible Muslim ban, which only affects about 12% of the world's Muslims, and plus it affects Christians in those countries and anyone else of any other faith, but that 6 of those 7 countries on the list ban anyone with an Israeli passport. And I think even if you've been to Israel and you've got a stamp in your passport, and even if you're not Israeli, sometimes you'll be banned. Did you see this?
Right. Yes, of course, because the local media is just reflecting how, like, I think I think someone said that in the UK after Sadiq Khan had a convention of 11 states that ban Israel. I can't remember who said that. And even Paul Joseph Watson pointed it out on his latest video, 20 questions for Muslims. Why are you so worried about Trump banning 7 states when these states, 11 states, are banning Israelis?
Yeah.
But they can work around it. They can justify it in their brains. Because Israel is an oppressive country, blah blah blah. still a Western country. But of course, you know that Western countries are held to a different standards,
Mm-hmm.
different
Yeah.
standards than countries like Iran, Iraq, and
This,
such.
the soft bigotry of low expectations. We can't expect anything of these savages. You know, we can't expect them
Exactly.
to act
We're
like us
not going to
civilized
hold them.
people.
No, we're not going to hold them accountable for all the shit they're doing.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's because they are like that naturally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're not, and if you're going to point that out, then you're a bigot,
Yeah,
right?
because
So
all cultures are equal. Isn't it funny though? It's typical leftist hypocrisy. So we have to treat them different because they're in some ways not, let's say, for want of a better word, backwards. But if we do treat them differently, we're bigots
yeah.
because all cultures are
So
equal.
as an Israeli, I'm used to double standards and even a single standard for Israel, which is worse than all the standards people put on any other states.
Mm.
I'm used to it from day one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
It's not a new thing for me.
yeah, I noticed another thing I noticed as well. I just was that yesterday or the day before there was a report out saying that anti-Semitic crimes in Britain were up something like 36% in the last year. Now, if you remember, if you go back to Brexit, a few months after Brexit, there was this massive story about how hate crimes were up 42% in the UK. They didn't mention
Yeah.
against Jewish hate crimes. They mentioned it was against Muslims, obviously, because Brexit was managed by all the racists who don't want Muslims into their country. And so that was the line that hate crimes are up. Buried in those stories last year was the fact that the police had gone out and asked people to report hate crimes more, so they didn't actually know whether hate crimes increased or whether people just started reporting them more. But I notice now that the figures have come out about anti-Semitic hate crimes, I don't see the media reporting it. And so I keep coming back to the same point, which is I understand why, for example, Iran and Sudan and whoever else will rationalize their anti-Semitism, but I find it much harder for the rest of Europe to do it. Do you have any?
Well, I actually, it doesn't surprise me at all.
Really?
I mean, if you look at the BBC, it's not only left leaning, but it has a strong bias against Israel. In everything they report, like 80% of their stories involving Israel has some kind of a error they need to address later. If someone points it out. And this is something that is very prevalent in Europe, especially in Scandinavian countries, and in the UK. I think less in Germany,
Yeah.
and I don't know what about France, but this is something that is like for many, many decades now. People have been very, empathizing with the Palestinian cause, and then you get the media pushing this narrative. Look how poor and oppressed they are, pushing the victim narrative in a very one-way street. I mean, of course, yes, the Palestinians are victims of A and B, but they are also perpetrators of C and D.
Yeah.
And it's more complex than they are portraying it. It's not like, it's not like when why do I go against the entire mindset of social justice? Because you see the very same pattern of thinking. You see they're just painting one side as an innocent and a helpless victim and one side as an evil perpetrator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And life is more complex than that. There's like both sides are doing stuff to each other. So this is something. Now, you talked about anti-Semitism, but it doesn't necessarily driven from anti-Semitism. To be an anti-Israeli or an anti-Zionist or a pro-Palestinian, there are many, many layers for that. So you can be an anti-Semite, or you can be just this person who thinks, oh, the poor Palestinians, they suffer and the Israelis are doing mean things to them.
Yeah.
We need to stop that, right? And there are a lot of people like that in Scandinavia, I think, and in the UK as well.
Yeah. Where did that?
And
do you remember? Remember last year, I think it was, or the year before, when I think Milo brought this up initially. The gays for Palestine. you get these ridiculous movements like gays for Palestine. It's like, do you realize how you would fare in Palestine? Why don't you do a world tour of the Middle East with your gay boyfriend and see how that goes down? It's just the
Exactly. If
absurdity.
you'll go to Palestine as a gay person, you'll be hanged or beaten up,
Exactly.
killed.
But they take these.
There's a dissonance in some people about, they are unable to see what is important, what is relevant and most important, and what is completely, irrelevant or has less relevance. So again, there is a huge propaganda machine against Israel in the media by organizations, and a lot of countries in the Middle East, rich countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, have been pumping this, like AJ Plus, for example, Al Jazeera, and the BDS, and many other movements and outlets that are paid to perpetuate this propaganda machine against Israel. So they're portraying as if it's one evil side against one innocent, naive side. And I actually read a book by an Israeli researcher on this propaganda machine. For example, I'll give you an example. The Guardian. In the year 2012, The Guardian mentioned Israel 3,000 times, and it mentioned the war in Iraq just like 50% of, like 1,500 times during that year. Now, during that year, the UK was involved in the war in Iraq, and 5,000 civilians or even more were killed. I think 25,000. I can recall the actual number. But like thousands of civilians were killed and tens of thousands got injured from the hands of the British Army. Of course, not only the British Army, but they were involved. And like 50 or 100 British soldiers died during that year. And they mentioned the war in Iraq 1,500 times. But they mentioned Israel 3,000 times. That's like, I'm sorry, I think I'm confusing the numbers. Like 3 times a day, which is 1,000 times, right? And they mentioned the war in Iraq, only half of that. But in that year, 35 Palestinians died, and most of them were terrorists. So 35, most of them terrorists, versus thousands and tens of thousands of people getting injured in the war in Iraq. And you mentioned Israel.
Well,
2 times more.
The Guardian, in my estimation, is like one step above BuzzFeed. You get
exactly.
BuzzFeed's toilet, and then the Guardian's just slightly better.
I think the Guardian is even a little bit better than the Independent. If you read the Independent.
Yeah, I haven't seen a couple of stories recently which made me fucking cringe in the Independent.
And the BBC is not very different. The BBC is probably the same, and CNN is the same. For example, when there was a terrorist attack in Jerusalem, 2 Palestinians came with machetes and axes, and they came into this synagogue and started slaughtering people.
Right.
Like for 10-15 minutes. Finally, police came and shot them dead. And the headline in CNN was, "Police shooting 2 Palestinians." That was the headline. I'm not kidding. And Israelis were, and this was not the first time CNN is doing such things. It was, they have been doing that for many times, and Israelis got so pissed off, they started, posting memes like, you see the airplane crashing into the Twin Towers, and the headline from CNN is, 48 Saudis die in plane crash. This is the level of ridiculous.
Hasn't it? It's just come out that the election campaign of last year, Brexit and the election campaign. So on Monday here in Australia, the Sydney Morning Herald, which is a left-leaning newspaper, had 20 headlines about Trump. All of them negative. All of them negative.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. Same with The Age in Melbourne, which is probably the biggest newspaper in Melbourne. Exactly the same thing. About 20 headlines, all of them negative. all of them. And
Listen. This is exactly what happened with the Independent, and I just tweeted that. I took a screenshot of the front page of the Independent and put it on Twitter, and all you can see are negative headlines, and one of them was so ridiculous. It was the day of the inauguration, and Obama and Trump are walking in the building, outside the building, and the headline said, Trump mimics Obama's walk as they walk out to the inauguration.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, this is the level of stupidity and hyper. I don't know. I forgot
outrage.
the word.
The fake outrage.
Yeah.
Hysteria.
Yeah. Hysteria, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
I think
I don't know what to say.
I feel like I don't know.
Shameful.
I don't know if it's because of the sort of circles that we run in, but I feel like it's getting more and more widespread. The people know now. People know that when they see a CNN headline, they at least have to double check another source. That they can't take it on face value. But that stupid dossier that came out about Trump getting women to piss on. Give him a golden shower in a fucking Russian hotel room that was released by BuzzFeed. That CNN would pick that up and even fuck with it, given that no one could verify it and it'd been out there for months. No one could verify anything in it, but they still had to throw it out there as though it was legitimate. I mean, it's not news, and people are waking up to it. What about the one that was not reported on much? This idea that Trump had removed a bust of Martin Luther King from the White House. Did you hear about this one? And what had happened is there was a bust of Winston Churchill. Obama had removed that, and there was a bust of Martin Luther King. And that what Trump had done when he came in, he put the Winston Churchill one back, and he took out the Martin Luther King one. Well, half of that's true. He did put the Winston Churchill one back, but he didn't take the Martin Luther King one out. And there was a photo taken, or was some kind of photo shoot, where you can't see the Martin Luther King one because someone's standing in front of it, so the media reported that he'd gotten rid of it. And then I think the New York Times printed like a one-line retraction, which no one ever sees, of course. They never see the retractions.
Yeah.
And it's just blatant dishonesty.
This is like I think they done a research about the BBC when in regards to Israel, and this is the case. I mean, like 80% of their stories need some kind of correction or retraction. So this is not something new to me, and I feel the same way when I'm reading Breitbart. I mean, at least I know they're saying we are very biased to our political from our political position. So when they write stuff, I double check, but I have no confidence in what I read on the newspaper anymore. And I think most people still watch CNN, watch MSNBC, and take things face value.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most people, you can't blame people who, they work and they've got responsibilities. They got kids to get to school and jobs and mortgages to pay, and they don't have time to sift through 15 different links to get to the bottom of a story or watch 5 YouTube videos. They just hear things. Yeah. They go to work.
Amazingly, YouTube has become the most reliable source of information out there.
Yeah,
it's kind of ridiculous and sad if you think about it.
Sure, it is. It's a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? Because on one, I think I agree with you that on some level it is the most reliable, and then on the other hand, it is also the most unreliable. It just depends, on the day. You can get some really stupid fucking opinion on YouTube. People just click a link and they go, oh, look, this thing, and they don't even check where it came from. They don't check sources, anything like that. But then some of the best investigative journalism happens on YouTube now, I think. I mean,
the only thing you need to do is to spot the more moderate YouTube channels that actually report about news, and then you need to find people on both sides of the fence. So if you're, for example, subscribe to someone like Sargon or someone from the center right-leaning position, then you need to also subscribe to Kevin Logan and get the other side of the story, and then you can you have references to all the sides, and you can make up your mind,
Hmm.
which is probably the best way to reach the truth, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's well, yeah. Otherwise, you're in an echo chamber. I'm glad that there are people that I don't get far lefties on my channel, but I get people on the left who are sort of classical liberals, or they're kind of um, they were Bernie supporters, but they couldn't vote for Hillary. They're that type of lefty.
Hmm.
But and so there's a debate on the channel a lot. But I get a lot of like I'll make videos critical of Trump, and they have been my worst performing videos in terms of subscribers. I will reliably lose 100 subscribers overnight if I criticize Trump in a video. That just happens. People just leave over one video.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem with politics.
Mm.
That's why we tell actors and people from
Celebrities.
Hollywood to
Yeah.
shut up about celebrities to shut up about their opinions, because
Mm-hmm.
then you go to a movie and then you cannot I can't watch this movie
Oh,
now
I know.
because people are so emotionally connected to their political views.
Mm.
It like bursts the bubble for them when they see people like I don't know, maybe Meryl Streep
Mm-hmm.
or someone from the right, and they cannot bear the fact that this person is now, you know, on the opposite side of of the political spectrum.
Yeah, that it really. I think they are America's royalty, celebrities, and so I think they just get this false idea of themselves because they're celebrated wherever they go. But I mean, it's straight away when you hear a celebrity talk, you're instantly disappointed because whatever character they play in movies that you like, now they've been
Yeah, exactly.
now they've been reduced to some ordinary dickhead on the internet making a comment, and they sound like an ordinary dickhead. They don't have any great insights. Usually, they have very little understanding of what they're talking about. I mean, look at that Ashley Judd, that absolute abomination that she did at that Women's March. I mean, talking
Yeah.
about the wage gap like
Or
it's
that
actually.
British guy who played Arthur in the remake. What's his name? The guy who supposedly looks good,
I'm not
long hair,
not
beard.
sure.
He's famous for being a extreme leftist.
Is he?
Ah, yeah. I wish we had the comment section. People would have helped.
Let me have a look.
He has a YouTube. He did some, a little bit of YouTube. You know that
Oh,
British actor?
not fucking Russell Brand. That dickhead.
Yeah, Russell Brand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
God,
Yeah, Russell
yeah.
Brand. So same thing. I used to like him, but
Mhm.
now he's such a putz. He's such an idiot.
Yeah.
Watching him in movies really is really ruining
Yeah.
it for me.
Yeah, I wonder if they realize that. I mean, I wonder if that has any flow on effect because, I mean, I like George Clooney. I like a lot of the movies that he's made, but it's that smug arrogance of George Clooney to sit there. That famous clip now that he will not live down for years, which is when he's there saying Donald Trump won't be our next president. He just says it matter of factly, smugly, arrogantly, and he looks so stupid as a result. He looks exactly like the smug elite living in an echo chamber, not in touch with the real world. But then you've got people like, let's say, Brad Pitt. Have you ever heard him make
No.
a political statement in his life? There's a guy who just kind of recognizes, yep, I'm going to shut the fuck up. I'm going to live my life quietly. I don't have anything special to say, so I'm going to shut the fuck up. And he does. And he's principled,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't get dragged into any of that shit. And these celebrities, I mean, they don't have any special insights. And surely by now, although they haven't learnt this lesson, surely by now you'd think that fucking maybe what we did last year with all these stupid ads and I want to punch Donald Trump in the face, maybe this is working against us. But they don't seem to have realized that.
No, people from the left have not been realizing that they have created after the Spencer punching.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a Kevin Logan video and I responded and I said, listen, the fact that the right, the alt-right or the far right or whatever is getting bigger and stronger is because of the way the progressive governments and progressive people have been treating the vast majority of people who are in the center.
Yeah.
and they go, fuck no, that's not our responsibility. People are, if people want to be bigots and, racist and what have you, then it's their own fault. It has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
And then they don't realize, they don't understand that when you are, simple people who are, they are not like radicalized or anything like that. But as soon as they have an issue or a personal problem, and they point out this problem, and what you do is just shame them and guilt tripping them, and saying, you don't have a problem. If you're going to say that, then you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're a whatever.
Yeah.
These people will feel left out, and these people will be drawn to people like Richard Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't seem to understand or acknowledge or to realize that this is what they're doing. They're not, they think they are right, but they are definitely not smart about it. And I'm not sure that they, of course, it's debatable that they are even right to begin with. But even if they were right, they would still be very stupid about it, not smart about it.
Well, arrogant.
And that's the biggest problem.
It's the arrogance.
It's arrogance because it's the arrogance that I see, in Israel. We had everything that happens in the world happened in Israel like 10 years ago. Right. I see the entire process, what goes on in the United States and in Europe right now is the same process that we have been gone through, moving from a left-leaning country that voted in for the guy, Yitzhak Rabin, who started the peace treaty with the Palestinians back in the 90s. And then we had a couple of center left-leaning governments since then, but people grew, tired of the left ignoring serious issues, and they started, in Israel became more and more right-wing. And then and everything that I hear from people on the left today, I heard from people on the left in Israel. If it's the media, if it's people in the street. I mean, for example, people in the left are saying, well, if you voted in for Trump, he's going to fuck the working class. And and so the working class deserved Trump because they should have voted for Hillary, that would have taken care of them more, because Hillary is a socialist and she looks for the poor, and now they got what they deserve. And this is this is how people in Tel Aviv talk. In Tel Aviv is left-leaning. And people in Tel Aviv are talking about people in rural areas, not rural areas, like in the suburbs or in, working class cities. Oh, they voted for the right, so they get what they deserve. We're not going to help them anymore. Blah, blah, blah. And then you get the media with their own dissonance about, every time we have an elections here, they are saying, yeah, this time the left will win. And this actually happened. And, the polls show that the left is going to win big time and the right is losing power. And everyone went personally, the media went personally against Benjamin Netanyahu. They had like everyday stories about his personality and about his wife. And I don't like the guy, to be frank. I think he's an asshole. But regardless, the media did to Benjamin Netanyahu what the media did to Donald Trump in the United States. And that backfired the very same way. And it's like a mirror. The world now is a mirror image of what happened in Israel. Yeah. And
I mean, look at that. Look at the treatment. Like I said, in Australia here, Sydney Morning Herald, 20 negative stories about Donald Trump. Now, no one mentioned anywhere in those stories that a Rasmussen poll showed that the majority of Americans were for some version of a ban. Then there was another poll by Reuters. Now, that poll was taken on Friday before the protests on the weekend. But then there was another poll taken on the weekend while the protests were ongoing by Reuters, which showed that 49% of Americans were for it and only 41% were against and 10% were undecided. So you have a situation where, like, Trump lost the popular vote, but this issue is a popular issue. So even though that issue, when you look at the polls, it splits down. Most Democrats are against it. Most Republicans are for it. More Democrats swing over to the Republican side of this issue. It is an issue that the majority agree with, at least on some level. And it's an issue, as like Douglas Murray put out this excellent article in The Spectator, which saying, like, if you believe that you're bigoted to have border protection services, then you're against every single country on planet Earth that has them. You know, this idea that there's a free flow of peoples across borders, it's just a utopian dream world, and it's silly and
Yeah, and
nonsensical.
there's this mindset. I see three mindsets here. One is saying every country is like a private property, and they get to decide who comes in and who's not.
Mm.
The second mindset is saying the same thing, but it's also saying we have the moral obligation to bring in immigrants and help people as much as we can.
Mm.
And then you get this third mindset, which says, no, a border is just an illusion. The earth belongs to everyone. No one has the right to stop immigrants from coming in to my country and receiving, benefits and what have you.
Yeah.
So a lot of people on the progressive side hold the third mindset,
Yeah.
and which is a very weird mindset, if you ask me. But
I think it's something that I understand when you're in university and you're still struggling to figure out how the world works, and you think that it's supposed to be a nice place, and you're still coming to grips with the reality that it isn't. It's a naive position to hold, but it's funny that people like Obama and Bernie Sanders seem to be able to hang on to those ideals for most of their life.
I think Obama not maybe, but Sanders probably more.
Yeah.
Sanders is more ideological than Obama.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say something. You reminded me of something. Well, I forgot now. What did we talk about a second ago when you started talking about? What was the subject?
Douglas Murray, the Spectator,
Before Douglas Murray, just before Douglas Murray.
The free.
Can you recall?
Just the poll saying that it was more popular in the United States to support.
Oh,
Trump.
yeah. You talked about the popular vote. And I just want to stress out that the popular vote is meaningless if you think about it, because the popular vote does not really reflect the actual popular vote in the United States. We actually don't know what the popular vote is, because when you are basing your system on the electoral system, then, for example, if you live in California and you know that 80% of the people, or like the vast majority of votes are going to the Democrats, for example, then you're not even inclined to go and vote because there is no sense of doing that. You won't change anything, so you just don't go and vote.
Yeah.
Right. So to know the actual who's really actually more popular, you need to have a system where the president is elected by popular vote. Only then you will know the actual popularity of each candidate.
Well, I don't know if you saw. Do you know a YouTuber by the name of Coltane? Have you seen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he put out a video recently, which is really fascinating. That shows that, when you overlay the counties that turned red, i.e., that voted Republican in the United States, what you see on the electoral map is a sea of red. I mean, it's just red everywhere. But where it's blue are the major centers, like New York, like San Francisco, like Los Angeles, big cities. And so it's really geographical. So if you go, I forget what population size he said, but if you go under a certain population size in the US, just about all the counties are turned red. And then if you go over a certain population size in the big cities, they're just about all blue. And so you have, if you look at it geographically, the Republicans own, fucking huge amount of the country geographically, but the Democrats dominate the big cities. And so I think it does speak to the sort of the inner city echo chamber effect of Democrats, to think that if you live in New York City, you're probably interacting with people who see the world in very similar ways. You're surrounded by hundreds and thousands of them. And so you get the feel that how could the rest of the country vote the other way, or at least even half the country vote the other way?
Again, this has actually happened to me as well when I was younger, in my 20s. I mean, I was surrounded by people who thought like me. I used to vote left, left-leaning to left-leaning parties.
Yep.
Even more left than center left.
Right.
When I was in my early 20s, and people around me, they had the same mindset, and I was sure that my party is going to lead by big, in big numbers. And it always surprised me when the center right or center or the right one.
Mm.
I said to myself, how could this be? Everyone that I talk to is lefty.
Yeah.
And again, it reflects what
Yeah.
we're going through right here.
The flip side, to this whole popular vote thing, which is, I think this is where Trump sucks, because he comes out and says stupid things like, "Oh, what about the 3 million illegals that voted for Hillary or whatever?" It's like, with absolutely no evidence for it. And Mike Pence.
No. Wait. There's a Pew Research that found there are like 2 million dead votes in each elections. So it means 2 million dead people are voting in every election.
Yeah.
On every election.
And
now it's easier for minorities in Black people and Hispanic people to vote, dead votes, because they're not required to show any ID. They can just come in and say, "Yeah, I'm John Smith, and I want to vote." So
yeah,
they are voting they are voting for all the dead people in their communities, and it's much easier for them to do. So statistically, most dead votes go for the Democrats.
Well, even if you give him a 1.5 million out of the 2 million, you still, Trump still loses the popular vote.
How much the difference was there in the
it's over
vote?
3 million votes now.
Well, again, okay. So maybe it's an indication that Trump would have lost the popular vote, even if the system was based on the popular vote to decide who is becoming president, right? But still, you need to have this system to really know who is the most popular candidate.
Oh yeah, I don't. My only gripe with Trump is like, I don't care that he lost the popular vote. Who gives a shit? Mike Pence came out with the exact right response to this. He said, "Look, if the path to the presidency was the popular vote, then we would have campaigned a lot more in California, New York, and Ohio." That's the proper response. You don't have to go and bitch and whinge about alleged 3 million illegals that voted. You don't have to make that shit up, because Pence's answer is perfect, because what it insinuates is that if they'd have gone there, they would have got more votes, which you can't actually know. But, the thing is, hey, we don't have to win the popular vote. We won the electoral vote. And the thing to do is to talk it up and say, you know what, Trump, he went around and did 6 fucking, went to airport hangars and filled them out with people 6 times a day in the states that mattered. That's, a really smart strategy. And he spent something like half of what Clinton spent. But I looked at this the other day. He spent a little more than half of what Clinton spent in her campaign, but he spent double on travel, because he went to where the people are, while she was busy falling over and fainting and getting lifted into fucking cars like a sack of potatoes.
Well, it's kind of expected of Trump to just open his mouth and let anything that goes in his head come out without any filters.
Yeah.
So this is not a new thing. I mean,
no.
The fact that he said that is not surprising.
It's not surprising. It just, I guess, I want him to do well. I want him to defy all the expectations and get shit done, good things, and really, if not make America great again, at least make it better. At least bring it back from the brink of fucking identity.
This is something that is funny to point out at people from the left who are against Trump so vehemently. I mean, if you ask them, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Trump to destroy the United States so next elections they will remove him, or do you prefer him to actually make America better? Have more, increase the growth, have more people get jobs, increase the national wealth, etc., etc. And they'll go, no, I prefer him to destroy they are going for the scorched earth strategy.
Yeah, that's what I always say about the left.
And this is a completely emotional reaction, an emotional response, and a completely illogical one.
Yeah. That's what I always say about the left. It's not, for them, it's not about principle. It's about what side you're on. It's not about principle. And you see this all the time. There was a great article today in one of the Australian papers about feminists. We have a new state premier in New South Wales. It's a woman, and the new health minister has just been appointed. The new women's minister, which I think is a redundant position, but anyway, the new women's minister is a woman, and she's pro-life. So, this should be a celebration. We have a woman premier in the state, and we have a woman's minister, of course. So we got two women in high positions, but no, it's not good because she's pro-life. So she's the enemy. So what does the left-wing media do, and the Guardian and all that? They come out and they attack her and they attack her and they attack her. Try to go back through her record from 20 years ago and find some shit because she's the wrong type of woman. She doesn't play the feminist game. That's the left for you. Mm-hmm. They don't give a fuck about principle. They give a shit about the side.
Yeah, and that's actually, I did a hangout with this radical left-leaning person on my channel on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Eve. And yeah, exactly. And this is exactly what happened during the discussion. I mean, he only saw what he wanted to see. When I came up with, facts, he was, what are you talking about? And I said, go and look for it yourself. And he was, no. These things do not happen. And then when you point out an example, he said, well, yeah, he dismisses that. Well, that's only one example. There is always a way to go around the facts you don't like.
Yeah.
And then put a spotlight on the facts that you like. There was a attempted terror attack in the Louvre. Mm-hmm. Someone with a machete came in and wanted to. He was shot. I see. Just reporting here.
Oh, really? Oh, shit.
Yeah. Just happened. Assaulted the soldier, yelled Allahu Akbar, had a machete, was shot dead by the soldier.
Jesus Christ. Now, you know what's going to happen now? Some dickhead's going to wheel a piano out in the street. They're going to sing a John Lennon song. Australia
I don't think...
going to put their lights up on the Harbour Bridge and
not enough dead people. Not enough dead people for that. No? Sorry. No, a piano is at least 20 dead. That's for a piano.
I mean, this is the
under 20.
Yeah, this is the.
It's going to be a candle or something. Yeah.
It's such a failure of Western politics and medias that. I mean, since the Danish cartoons, basically, Danish cartoons on when the media blanketly refused, except for a couple of sort of fringe media outlets, to reproduce those cartoons. Ever since, the fascists, and I put anyone in that category who wants to shut down free speech, ever since then, they have been gaining more and more ground. And it's just stunning lack of cowardice to call this shit out. Again, it's a soft bigotry of expectations. Oh, we can't. I mean, these idiots who see a cartoon of their supposed fucking prophet, that they spaz out, and that we're supposed to understand this as their culture. So no.
Listen, people in Europe have been living in a bubble for the last 4 or 5 decades. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about not in the last decade, but before that. Yeah. Since, I guess, the 60s until, the turning of the millennium. Mm. And they have been living in this utopian bubble, you can call it that. And everyone was nice, everyone was kind to each other, and they really, really lost touch with how ruthless and how ruthless the world and people and states and nations and can be. And now it's on their doorstep, and they are still in this dissonance. They don't understand what is going on, but they will understand eventually. I think it will take a generation for that to pass. Again, this is what happened here in a small scale. It's going to be in a very large scale, in a big large scale in Europe.
Yeah. Oh, it's already there. But what I mean, you had
people are still voting for Merkel after all she did.
I know that,
and
that
people
really,
in Sweden are voting for the left after all they did.
It stuns me that Merkel. I mean, it looks like she'll get re-elected again, doesn't it? I mean, it's stunning to me. The good thing is, it looks like Geert Wilders. I mean, Geert Wilders is ahead in the polls at the moment in the Netherlands. That's a good thing. Marine Le Pen doesn't look like she's got what it takes to get up in France, but things can change. Yeah, it's stunning. Merkel. I mean, 5 years ago, in short order, you had David Cameron, Merkel, and I think it was Sarkozy at the time, perhaps. I'm not sure,
Hmm.
all came out and said that multiculturalism had failed. And it had failed, not just failed in recent decades, it had failed, like they went back and said, look, when immigrants came over and, to rebuild Europe in post-war, we thought that they would go home. And they didn't. They stayed here. You know?
Well, the thing with Merkel is that she said multiculturalism had failed, but because we failed it, because it was our fault for not doing what needed to be done so it would work. It's not
Yeah.
because the cultures are incompatible.
This is some kind of
Uh,
Stockholm syndrome, isn't it? Where these things happen, the terrorist attacks or whatever, and we, or in the West, we sort of blame ourselves that we haven't done enough to help the poor people acclimatize. We
and
haven't.
that's why they raped us.
Yeah.
That's why they're raping our women because we haven't been nice enough.
And even some of the girls that get raped then refuse to report it, or they report that they were raped by a white guy, as happened in Germany, where that girl reported that she was raped by a white guy because she didn't want to stigmatize migrants. I mean, it's suicide.
So this is how I got red pilled in 2001 because that actually was my mindset. During the 90s, when we began the peace process with the Palestinians, I thought to myself, well, the Palestinians have a very rough life. They have no infrastructure. They are poor. They're miserable. Of course, they will, you know, uh, rise up against Israel and protest and be violent. That's completely natural, and I would have done the same if that was my situation. So we started the peace process. A lot of money was starting to flow into the Palestinian Authority. They got more and more land. I mean, Israel retreated from Nablus and Gaza and Ramallah and many other cities. And they even had a casino, and it started to look like Las Vegas. A lot of Israelis would go to in the weekend to Jericho, which became a Palestinian under the Palestinian Authority. They built a huge, beautiful casino, and Israelis came in, spent a lot of money, and Israelis went to the to the West Bank to shop and to restaurants, and everything was, except of course the terrorist attacks that kept on happening in Tel Aviv. Buses exploded, restaurants exploded, discotheques exploded, and hundreds of people died. And that's during the time we retreated from the territories. And I thought to myself, well, these are just radicals that want to ruin the entire process, right? We need to stay with the moderates. We need to continue, retreating from the occupied territories, continue to help rebuilding the West Bank and Gaza. And I thought to myself, if these people are going to get a better life, then they're going to stop the violence. And in the year 2000, 2001, I think 2000, the Israeli Prime Minister, the left wing, the Labor Party, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat went to the White House to Camp David to finalize the peace agreement. And if you read the protocols, the Israeli Prime Minister offered Yasser Arafat almost everything. He offered him they almost like 95% of the territories back, because 5% there's like a huge Israeli city which you cannot uproot like a big city, right? That's impossible. So he said, listen, except that part, we're going to give everything back. And Arafat said no, came back and started a very violent uprising, actually a military a war. You can call it a war. So he started a war, and then there was this lynch in Ramallah, a very famous one. If you go and watch it, the lynch in Ramallah. Two Israelis accidentally came into Ramallah because Ramallah and Jerusalem are very close. You just drive this road, and instead of turning right, you turn left or keep on going straight, you'll end up in Ramallah. And the Palestinian Authority police caught them, took them in and beat them to death. And there's this famous, they took him to the police station, beat them to death. And there's this famous picture of this Palestinian police officer. His hands are red with blood, completely red. And he goes out the window, and there's a mob outside the window screaming Allahu Akbar, and his hands are in the air showing everyone the blood. And then they just throw the bodies from the window to the streets so the mob can continue to mutilate the dead bodies, and you can just see people with sticks. They're just beating the shit out of these two dead Israelis.
Yeah.
And that was a red pill moment for me. That was the moment I realized that these people, it's not about them being poor or miserable. It's a cultural thing. It took me some time to actually process that in my mind.
Yeah.
But this is the moment, the pivoting moment that I stopped with this naive perception of, it's only about, they are victims, they are poor, they are miserable. If we'll make their lives better, then they will behave like I expect them to behave. It doesn't work like that in the Middle East. And this is the arrogance and the hubris of the American government when they left Iraq. This is how ISIS was formed, because they tried to form a secular Iraqi army comprised of Kurds, Shiites, and Sunnis.
Yeah.
And they thought that if they're going to pay them, great salary and benefits and, dental plan and good pension, then these people would be acting like an army. And they fell apart in day one when ISIS came in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because these guys are incapable of even sitting in the same room, let alone be a united army.
Yeah, someone actually tweeted this the other day. They said something about what the Middle East needs is capitalism and wealth creation, all the rest of it. And I said no. I mean, just look at I think most of the 9/11 attackers were university educated. A lot of the people who carry out terrorist attacks are some of the most privileged, and I put that in inverted commas, privileged in those societies. I mean, they're doctors, they're professionals that end up doing this. It's not, you can't say it's poverty or disadvantage that's driving these people. It's nonsense.
The only problem is the culture in the Middle East has different values. It's not like the Western culture, which values life and liberty above all. They value death and honor above all. And this is something that the people in the West sometimes are completely reluctant or unwilling or unable to grasp. And once you understand that, you understand everything about the Middle East.
It's so stunning, though, and I think Sam Harris Sam Harris has been pilloried by the left, his own liberal left, for saying the kinds of things that you've just said. And then I think it was last year or the year before when ISIS came out basically with a manifesto about why we hate the West and why we fight you, basically. And it's everything that Sam Harris says. And furthermore, when they talk about, we've seen plenty of interviews now with jihadists. And for some reason, there's certain people on the left that just refuse to believe these people when they say that, I believe that dying for the cause is the highest honor I could possibly receive. I'm going to paradise. And there's people, the liberal left, they just refuse to believe this. They can't wrap their heads around it.
I'll tell you why. They ignore things like honor killings, for example, right? They say it's just, people being violent, and they are just justifying it by, they don't see it as a cultural thing, because what they see, they are surrounded by moderate Muslims that share the same mindset. So they see Muslims sharing the same mindset of, life and liberty before death and honor. And they're thinking to themselves, well, if I can see 1 or 10 or 100 Muslims that think like that, that means that it's not a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works in the Middle East.
And then when it's in your face and you can't not recognize it, what you do is you just blame it on American foreign policy. It's out,
Right. And I think the most funny and ironic thing, or hypocritical thing, is they point out at very minuscule things like buying blue shirts for boys and pink dresses for girls, and that's like a huge indicator of a society which is
in decline.
Have a very that is culturally patriarchal. Or if you make a rape joke, then this is a rape culture. But when you have a culture that of men and women and people killing their own daughters just because they went on a date before they got married,
Yeah.
that's not a death and honor culture.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the level of dissonance in these people.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Because in Australia, we pay sort of a lot of attention to Indonesia because it's close to us, and of course, it's the biggest biggest populated Muslim country in the world. And recently, I don't know if you've noticed, there's been a spate of not killings but whippings of young women, public whippings because of the exact crime that you just mentioned. They went on a date before marriage with some guy, and that they're being publicly flogged in the square. Now, up until
this is systemic. So this is even systemic. This is not even a cultural thing. This is a systemic thing.
Yeah. And
right?
Of course,
systemic punishment.
The left, one of the left's arguments in this country has been for a long time that look at Indonesia. It's a secular, democratic nation, doesn't have any, they point to Indonesia as this wonderful Muslim nation. They used to do it about Turkey, but Erdogan has probably fucked that up for a while. But it isn't. It isn't the utopia they want to believe it is. They have some really backwards medieval fucking views about women in particular, but the left is completely silent about it. And so you have these dickheads marching on Washington complaining about fucking tampon taxes. I mean, it's just absurd.
Well, these are people living in bubbles, but I want to be an asshole and correct the two things that you said. The one thing is how you pronounce Erdogan, not Erdogan.
Oh.
That's one thing. And the second thing is Geert Wilders.
Actually, oh, really?
That's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Because Dutch people, they say
Yeah. I actually did know I used to work with a guy who was kind of my boss for a while, who was Dutch, but that was 15 years ago. I'd kind of forgotten about that. Yeah, Erdogan, because I'd heard people say Erdogan, but it's spelt with, there's a G in there, right? Isn't there a G in the name?
But that's because, for example, Gaza is not actually pronounced Gaza. It's pronounced Gaza.
Right.
Gaza. So it's like a L, which can be transformed into a G.
Yeah.
So that's why you got Gaza.
Yeah.
It's Gaza. So it's,
I guess that's the benefit of living in those parts of the world. It's why I know why Japanese pronounce things wrong, because I lived there for 13 years. I know all the mistakes they make and why they make them, because they don't have an R and an L sound. They only have one sound, and it's kind of halfway in between, and they can't pronounce.
You don't need to go that far. You can go to Russians. Russians don't have H, so they say H instead, like hamburger.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And what the Germans don't have, they don't have what, V's or W's? Which one? I forget.
W maybe, because it's
because they say
we are trying to
Wehrmacht. They say Wehrmacht, so instead of the Wehrmacht, it's spelt with a W.
And they don't have V. Yeah, don't have V, so it's F. So it's instead of von, it's fon.
Right.
Thailand
is the same. They have a V in their letters in the way that they spell things. But it's it's a Sanskrit looking script, but they don't say it. They pronounce it with a W, so it's like it looks like Sukhumvit is the way you spell that. Sukhumvit's the famous street in Bangkok, but it's actually Sukhumvit is the way they say it. And they have all kinds of. They have an L in their language, but when it's an L is on the end of a word, it turns into an N. It's just some fucking bizarre shit. There you go.
The same thing with people. I think from. Argentina. They transform M into N many times.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Thais have some weird shit. They have, the sound in the word ring, the NG sound at the end. Now, they put that sound on the beginning of words. In the English language, you don't have that. It's really fucking hard to make that sound if you don't have it in your language. But they use it all the time. Like what's a ngu? Ngu is a fucking snake, I think. but it's really hard to say. And as a Westerner, you're always fucking up words in Thai. There you go, people. You got a language lesson out of this one. That must mean we're near the end. We started talking about sounds of words.
Yeah. This conversation is going down.
All right, so we're about an hour 20 in, but I think it was really good. We actually talked about some interesting stuff there, and I wanted to get you on for a long time because I need a perspective from Israel, and I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. I love your channel. It's so informative. Became one of my favorite channels actually.
Oh, thanks, man. And you wanna give a shout out? Because I bet that half my subscribers are probably subscribed to you already, but do you want to give a shout out to your channel and Twitter and stuff?
Yeah, I have a channel. It's shit. Don't subscribe.
He's SkepTorr on. I think you know him. I mean, your avatar's one of the more famous ones. You've been around there. Been around for a while. You did get an upgrade, didn't you, recently? There's a little bit of an upgrade.
You mean about the avatar?
Yeah.
Someone drew that for me.
Yeah.
It was like a process, like an evolutionary process.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I'll cut it off here, and we'll catch up again soon.
Cool.
Thanks, man.